up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Robbie Cassidy, and in this podcast I want to look into when is it time to rest, or so when do you know that it's time to start looking at maybe taking a deload week, or when is it time to pull back from the training that you're doing and give yourself a chance to adapt to it. The reason I want to go into this is because at this time of the year, a lot of people are back into the swing of training. They've probably put down 6 weeks now, or 8 good weeks of training, and it's getting around the time that they need to pull back a small bit, deload, and prepare for the next phase. Because if you continue just to keep up in your training load and you don't pull back, you never give the body a chance to adapt, and as a result, you're at risk of injury. So I want to keep this episode short and sweet and touch on the most important things of how you can set yourself up and when to know when it's time to give the body a chance to recuperate and recover. So to jump straight into it then, first thing I want to talk about is what causes the body to break down. What causes you to get injured? What causes you to, let's say, get extremely fatigued? I guess what increases your risk of injury overall in performance and in training? Well, first off, we have to look at the body or the nervous system, as I always talk about, in that stress state. When it's in a stress state, it can't adequately heal itself because it needs to allocate resources either towards putting them into your bloodstream so that you can get out of a situation, or the other side is actually putting them towards muscles that have been worked, joints that have been worked to promote healing. Now, as I said, you can't be doing them at the same time, and the nervous system alters between a parasympathetic and a sympathetic state, which is a rest and digest state and a fight or flight state. And it does that so that it can adequately allocate resources around the body. Okay? Now, what happens a lot of the time when the body starts to break down and when you start to get these overuse injuries is that you are burning the candle from both ends, and that you are overtraining or you're training too much and you're not giving it a chance to heal. Now, we know it works off a stress and adaptation system. When you stress the body in general, if you give it time to adapt, it gets stronger and it'll be able to handle that same level of stress or higher the next time you do it. And that's why we go to the gym. That's why we train on the pitch. That's why you train in your runs, is because you are working on that stress and adaptation system. So you need to work on both ends of it, and you need to make sure that you are including the adaptation as opposed to just focusing on the stress. And when we're looking at excessive stress with inadequate recovery, that's when you start to get these injuries and these overuse issues. Okay, so we need to look at stress in all forms, because as I said, it's as simple as fight or flight, rest and digest, and it's on like a dial 0 to 10. If you are in a stress state, you're on, let's say, a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or even up to 10. And if you are in a resting state, you're from, let's say, 1 to 5. So 5 is in the middle really, but you're 1 up or 0 up even. I'll say 0 is asleep. And you can turn that nervous system tone up or down using different things, whether it be movements, if it's diet, if it is breathing, sleep, whatever it is, you can change that around. Okay, now where do most people fall down when it comes to deciding on when it's a time to rest is that a lot of people don't take into account the lifestyle factors that could be affecting the dial, okay, and affecting nervous system tone. And what I mean by that is that if you are stressed at work and if you are stressed at home, you're going to tend towards that higher notch, okay, or higher tone, the more of a fight or flight tone, because you're always allocating resources of how to get out of a situation, how to figure out what's the best way to preserve the body and survive, as well as you're always thinking about what's the next thing that you have to do. Okay, and this is where it comes down to people are able to handle different stressors better. Okay, so obviously if you have exercised a lot in the past, you're able to handle exercise better. If you've gone through a lot of stress with their work and stuff, in general you see that a lot of people who are higher or more powerful jobs are able to handle emotional stress, or are able to handle stress from the outside coming in a small bit better. But if you're new to a job and it's a new position, you may not be as well able to handle it in the first couple of weeks, and it might take you a bit of time to adapt to that. Now, the reason I want to talk about that is that if we don't take that into account and we only look at our training, what can happen is you can get these consistent small stressors always playing a role and always kind of just taking that small bit back from you and taking your energy away. And you're on top of that, you're training probably, you could be training 4, 5, 6 days a week, hopefully not 7, but they're also pulling away in the background. So even though you finish training and it's time to get back into that rest and digest state, you still have conflict going on in your life and you still have stress going on in your life, which is tending you to, or keeping you on the upper end of that scale. Okay, and a lot of people don't take this into account, how much of an effect this can have on them over time. And as I said, it's like burning the candle from both ends. It shortens the lifespan of what you can do, because you're always getting energy taken from you and you're never given it a chance to recuperate. And then I think a lot of people maybe go off their feeling a small bit too much. Now, feeling can be the best form of understanding when you're recovered, and it can also be, I guess, it can be awkward, or it might not be working as well, and it might not be the most accurate representation. And the reason being is that you could have a good bit of energy because you are after, finishing a certain presentation, or you could have a lot of energy because your team just won and you want to just get straight back into training again. Even though you've been pushing hard for the last couple of weeks, you'll get a burst of energy. And a lot of the time people can work on that, or they may be using stimulants like caffeine, and they just push through pre-workout, stuff like that, and they're able to just push through sessions even when they should be pulling back. And that becomes an issue then, okay? Because that's when you're relying on something that is not an accurate representation of what's going on in the body. So if we get an understanding of I guess, your training cycles, your training blocks, and then everything else that's going on outside, that's when you can make real change, and that's when you'll have a better idea of when it's time to rest. Okay, so I guess to jump into the take of it then, when is it actually time to schedule a recovery period? And what I mean by recovery period, it could be a deload week, it could be an extra rest day, it could be that you just take an evening off training, okay? And getting an understanding of this is really, really important, because you can make the most out of your training, and there may be times that you do need to pull back, but maybe times then that you can actually push on a small bit more, okay? And it's getting a better understanding of the body itself. So first off, I think training blocks and looking at your training blocks are a great way to start. You can look at your, let's say, your micro, you can look at your meso, and you can look at your macro plan and your blocks. And basically your micro is your weekly blocks, so what your training is looking like in a week to week. Your meso is when you're looking at more monthly stuff, let's say 4 to 8 weeks at a time. And your macro is when you're looking, or I should say 6 to 8 weeks at a time, and even more. Your macro is when you're looking at the whole season. And you need to take these into account, because it's easier to look in advance and say, well, I'm going to train for 6 weeks here, I'm going to take a deload week then, and then I'm going to train for another 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, whatever it is, and then you're going to take another deload week. And that way it leaves the guessing out of it, and you can actually plan in advance. This is a really, really effective way of pulling back when it's time to pull back. And people who find it difficult to do that, this is probably one of the best ways. I know a lot of the clients that I work with really struggle with pulling back. They love to just push on and keep working and keep getting through it. But as a result of that, you're going to get consistent niggling injuries, small injuries that are just going to be affecting you when they shouldn't affect you that much. Okay? So I think it's important to look at that and break down your training schedule. I think every 6 weeks is a good time to plan a deload week, depending on what you're able to handle. Once you have a 6 week one done, I would say that you can probably push that onto an 8 week block. The reason being is that it's the stress and adaptation, it works well. Usually you can handle more the second time, so the 8 week block can work well in those situations. Then what I would also say is I plan recovery days each week. What I like to do is I like to try get 2 recovery days in a row every week. It's a kind of a general guideline. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's something that I prefer to do with my clients, and I find that if I can put that in place, it makes a huge difference to their performance and how they get on, and then it really significantly reduces their injury injury count or injury risk, because I find that once we do that, they'll notice that things start to kick up. They take 2 days, maybe even 3 days some weeks, and a lot of the time those issues clear up way faster. Okay, so they're not out of the big games, they're not out of your main training sessions, or you're not out of the big races. Now, if you do that, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It may be that you have to do a high volume week where you have, let's say, a lot of training, you train 6 days, and then you do 1 or 2 of those, and then you actually have a medium to low volume week where you're planning 2 to 3 rest days. That's where you kind of get into the micro cycles of it. And that's when it makes a big difference, is when you can really manage those and understand when it's time to push and pull. Then I think on top of that is when you notice these are kind of signs that the body is fatigued. These are signs that the body wants you to stop and wants you to give it a chance to recover. And I think these signs themselves are something that if people got a better understanding of their own signs and how it is for them, because with this, it is so individual to the personality type, to the genetics of the person, how they have reacted in the past, their coping mechanisms. There's a lot to this, and it's different for everybody, and it's also different depending on the type of stressors that are coming in, whether they are emotional stressors, cognitive stressors, physical stressors, whatever it is. These will present different in people, okay? And I think the first one that people will take into account is you'll notice that injuries start to flare up. Okay, that's usually when there's been a lot of physical training. Okay, that's when you'll notice injuries start to flare up. You might get a sore shoulder, sore knee, a sore ankle, and generally you can relate this back to the amount of training that you've been doing. It may be that you've had too many high weeks in a row. It may be that you haven't pulled back in time, and then in general it's probably time to give yourself a couple of days off to rest and recover. Okay, now injuries are, it could be that pain starts to kick up, but it could be that you actually get muscle soreness and get this excessive aching, that your shoulders and your neck are really sore, your muscles are really tight. When that happens, then you also have to look at the cognitive side of things and the emotional. You need to tie them all together, because that could be happening because you are, as I said, you could be having conflict at work and you're trying to avoid someone. You could be getting pain in your shoulder from that because it's a sensitive part and your nervous system recognizes that it's a sensitive part, and as a result then it'll flare up earlier. You could also be sleeping poorly and the body's fatigued, and this is what happens to a lot of people who relate pain to posture or posture to pain, and I'll do a podcast on that very soon. Is that because you're fatigued, because you're tired and you're holding the same position all day, then it's like you start to feel like it's the position that you're in is causing the pain, when really it's the fact that you're overly fatigued, maybe not as happy with the job that you're in at the moment, maybe not as happy with your lifestyle, maybe you're not moving as much, you have stopped training a small bit. But all these things need to be taken into account when you notice that they kick up. Then outside of that, you're looking at like excessive fatigue. So where you find it difficult to get out of bed in the morning, it's huge. If you find it very hard to get motivated to go training, if you're finding it difficult to even meet with friends, and you just need to go, when you get home you go straight to bed, that's excessive fatigue, and it's probably time to ease off there. Okay, and a lot of the time that will come with the aching and the muscle soreness as well. So that's generally when it is time to pull back a small bit also. After that then, I think other things that happen to people, and ones that you probably are more aware of, is the fact that you start to lose power training, your strength is dropping, you might see your lifts in the gym aren't going up anymore. It could be that you aren't sprinting as fast, it could be that you're fatiguing early in training. It's just, I guess, decrements in performance, even though your training is increasing, and even though you're training all the time, your performance isn't increasing, or it's actually decreasing in a lot of situations. That's a huge sign that it's time to ease off the training a small bit more, and that might be one that you notice mid-season or later in the season, that you're thinking, Jesus, I was able to really fly through training sessions here, I was really flying through runs, and now I just can't get the same energy to do it. I can't, like let's say your times might be dropping, your performance on the pitch might be dropping, you're just not able to keep up with the pace. That's huge then, and that's when it is time to ease off and pull back just a small bit more. So they're kind of the main ones that you'll notice with performance, and you'll notice with the physical, how the body starts to kick up. And you're looking at like injuries, as I said, excessive fatigue, decrements in performance, weakness and power loss, muscle soreness, all of those things, and muscle tightness. All of those are huge signs of fatigue. And it could be fatigue, and it could be muscle weakness when you're getting muscle tightness as well. So it's both sides. Now, when we start to look at the other stuff and the things that I guess are people wouldn't realize as much, but in some people actually might kick up a small bit more, would be the emotional side of things. And with that, what we'll find is that you may become more irritable or more anxious in certain situations or around certain people, more so than you usually are. It could be that you are getting more anxiety attacks or panic attacks, and you don't really know why. That's a big sign of fatigue as well. Your mood could be all over the place. You could be having, I'd say, mood swings, or I guess you just can't find it difficult to focus on different activities. It could be you'd be finding it difficult to judge people or judge scenarios or situations better. And on top of that, you may find that your decision making has slowed down. Now, with slow decision making and poor judgment, you're looking at the emotional side and the cognitive side as well. Now, the physical can play into it, but in general, when you're starting to see these things kick up to a small bit more, you're looking at the emotional and cognitive. And a lot of the time, sleep is involved with that. When you're looking at the lower moods, on the more severe cases, you may be looking at depressive symptoms. That's a huge sign of that things may not be going your way, but it's a huge sign of fatigue in certain populations, and lack of sleep. And when you're looking at the irritability and anxiousness, it could be more at the emotional side of things. Okay, so that it could be that you're just getting emotionally drained by the people around you, and it's time to step back, take a break, spend a bit of time by yourself, maybe do a bit of journaling, a bit of meditation, to really give yourself a chance to kind of build back up that emotional energy so you can start to get through your day at the same level as you were before. Difficulty waking up in the morning is a big one that I talked about earlier on, it with excessive fatigue, but that could be to do with a lot of other things as well. So that can come with physical, that can come with emotional, that can come with the cognitive fatigue, and it's a big one that you need to become more aware of. Now, it could be that your sleep itself is affected, and I've talked about sleep and sleep tactics in a very recent podcast, so it may be worth checking that one out as well. And I think it's the one just before this. And by doing that, you'll get a better idea of, like, the only way you'll notice how much of an effect sleep has on you is by actually getting your sleep right and starting to sleep 7 to 8 hours, or making small changes so that your sleep quality has improved. Then you'll say, okay, Jesus, I really missed out on this over the last while. When we look at very, I guess, more severe forms of fatigue, we're actually looking at headaches, severe headaches. As I said, depressive symptoms are a huge one. Dizziness is a big one. If you start to get those, or double vision, then it's really time to go to a doctor, get that checked out first, obviously, most importantly. But it might be time that you need to start looking at getting your deload weeks in, pulling back, and rescheduling your or reorganizing your calendar. All right, because when it gets so severe that you're either picking up injuries all of the time, that you're actually having neurological symptoms associated with it, as I said, like dizziness, headache, double vision, just really slow decision making, that's when it starts to become dangerous, and you need to obviously go get assessed by a doctor, but you need to pull back then as well on your training and reorganize your calendar. So I think, guys, that is probably enough for today. I don't want to talk too much more on it right now, because I wanted to cover the main things, and I wanted to give you a better understanding that if you needed to flick back to different parts of this podcast, you could. But in a general sense, when it's time to schedule a recovery period, first off, before that even comes into play, you need to assess the psychological, you need to assess the physical and the emotional as well, and how all those could be having an impact on you. Are you fighting with someone all the time, but that's just draining your energy? Are you, let's say, do you have a presentation due that you need to get done, you have to do a lot of work for it, and as a result then you're finding that that's taking a lot of your energy and your motivation is dropping? Or are you training 6 days a week or twice a day in a lot of situations and not giving yourself a chance to recover, or not actually adding in any rest days? Once you take all that into account, then you can start to look at the other things. So it's like scheduling your recovery periods in advance, where you're looking at it in microcycles, mesocycles and macrocycles. Micro is your weekly, meso your training block, which is like whatever 6 to 8 to 12 week blocks, and your macro is more of a season and how you're structuring those over the season. Then I said that you should be probably trying to schedule 2 recovery days a week if possible at all. When you start to notice injuries flaring up, excessive fatigue, irritability, anxiousness, excessive muscle aching, or muscle soreness, a weakness, power loss, and maybe a drop in your performance on the pitch, in your runs or in your training sessions, you may notice that your muscles are starting to get tight. Then it's time to ease off as well. When you find that let's say your mood is being affected, as I said, that anxiousness is kicking up a bit more, if you're getting any headaches, dizziness, then it's a bit more serious, and it's probably time to start getting assessed with that, okay? Because it may not just be the fatigue itself. But yeah, because that is everything from me today. I'm going to finish off the podcast by saying if anyone does need help with any of this side of things, with the load management, with your training, with overcoming injuries, if you have an injury that's going on for a long time and it's stopping you from training at the level you'd like, well, send me a message. We can jump on a call and discuss it in a bit more detail. And if it's something that you're interested in, we can start making a training program, develop a bit of a plan and work on that. If it's something that you feel that, okay, I just need to have a couple of sessions to look at that, well, then we can book in a consultation and we can look at in a good bit more detail, as well as figuring out a plan, a shorter term plan of what you can do to get it right. But if you do need to, just write to me on Instagram or send me an email at mobilitytutor@gmail.com, whatever's easiest for yourself. And I look forward to hearing from you. If you could, guys, I would really, really appreciate it. I just noticed that Spotify now you can rate podcasts. I'd love if you could rate my podcast on Spotify. It'd make a huge difference with the ranking and give me a better idea of what you like. Also, please write to me on Instagram and let me know which episodes you like and what you'd like to see more of. On top of that, I would absolutely love if you could share it on your story or share it to a friend who you think would be interested in it. It goes a long way in promoting the podcast, and as I said, I'll have a better idea of what I need to cover more to serve you best with these. So that's everything from me today. I hope everyone is doing well, and I will chat to you all again next week. Have a good one.